Okay, guys, after having gotten back to Africa for a while, now we are going to get back to the Americas. And we've been a while, and hey, we're still over here, so let's get right to it. Um, when last we left, we were talking about the Mayas, and then the Mayas kind of fell apart. Well, another empire that was able to kind of, a culture, if you will, not really an empire, that was able to develop were the Toltecs. And the Toltecs were based out of their main city of Tula in central Mexico. And that city of Tula was over 60,000 people, so it was pretty impressive. They were known for having a huge army and we're able to dominate an area through the artifacts that we have found that is quite large, most of southern Mexico. And the way that they did it was through a use of a tribute system in which they had an army that was incredibly powerful, and the whole idea was like, you give us stuff or we'll wreck you. And we are not sure how long they lasted. We don't have a lot of writings, and that's because of Europeans a little bit later. But we do know eventually the city itself of Tula was destroyed, in all likelihood by fire. And we do have some architectural evidence of that. We only have a little bit of Tula left. But it was a culture that was pretty strong and pretty influential to the one that's going to come after it, that's going to be really the key player in Mexico and Central America. And here's what's left of Tula. As you can see here, definitely had a step pyramid type structure and some statues. Maybe they were religious in nature. We're really not 100% sure. But again, you have a city like this, you can tell that it was advanced and pretty impressive. But really, the strongest group in this area at this time was the Mexica. Yes, that's where we get the Mexico from. Okay, but we often refer to them as Aztecs, but their official name is Mexica. They operated out of their main city of Tenochtitlan, which was built in Lake Texcoco right here. Yes, in Lake Texcoco. Now, you cannot find Lake Texcoco because it was destroyed by the Spanish and the actual city was drained. We'll get there. But these guys were conquerors, okay? They ruled an empire that was made up of many different cultures like the Otomi, the Tarascan, they actually helped to dominate the Tepanec, the Zapotec, the Mixtec. So they conquered these areas and they were absolutely brutal. They ran their empire through the use of violence. Um, in many ways, guys, I think you can kind of liken them to the Spartans. They have a lot of similarities to them. But what was probably the most impressive was their city of Tenochtitlan, which was, for all intents and purposes, a floating city. They had kind of where the Aztecs came from, this small island in the middle of Lake Texcoco, and they were able to expand and build upon it until eventually they had this beautiful looking city. The Spanish wrote a lot about it, gave us very many details. That's why we were able to kind of reconstruct it like you see here. Unfortunately, the Spanish would later on destroy it, but nonetheless, you can't even imagine the degree of engineering that it takes to build pyramids and these city blocks on water, including their farms, which I'll explain. Now, what was so impressive for them was their different types of agricultures that they were able to do. And I have agricultures up here because they have it a different way. They had outside areas in which they would do your traditional planting with things like, corn and some eventually some rices, but grains, tomatoes, and peppers, and they were able to feed a lot of that through. This is a aqueduct. This is no different than the Roman aqueducts. They were able to have these aqueducts that run as much as 5+ miles away. But really, what was impressive was their Chinampas, which is over here. The Chinampa was a floating garden that they were able to use in Lake Texcoco and other lakes in the region. And basically, you see, it would be this small kind of floating platform of reeds that they would then go under the water and scoop up the muck from the bottom of the lake, which was very, very fertile, lay it over that, and then plant crops in it. Now you don't have to worry about watering, because then what happens is that the crops, their roots grow into the water and they grow. It really was impressive, and these Chinampas could actually grow 7 different crops in a year. And if you see over here, you see your tomatoes and your peppers, you see some greens, here they have corn. So some of the most sophisticated and advanced farming in the world was being done right here in the Americas. Their culture was really, I'm not going to lie, it was based on violence. You had the royalty and the nobility at the top, and then you had the warriors, and everybody else was a commoner or a slave. Um, the males were expected to be warriors, and if you wanted any type of status, you had to be a warrior. And it seemed that they were able to mark their status, as you see on the picture below, through the use of ceremonial piercings. Women had no rights at all. They were not allowed to own property, and really the only way that they got honor was by having sons, or having sons or husbands that did something significant, so they would kind of get credit for birthing them. The nobles ran everything. They got military training, and it was that high-end military training that kept everybody else in line. It was very similar to the Spartans in that way. The commoners were very oppressed. They live in and around the Chinampas. They are referred to as the Kapuli. They are used for farming and building projects. They are used for hard labor. They are not really permitted any rights. They were kind of tied to their areas, and again, everything being dominated by the nobility and the warriors. Religion was very important. They have different types of pyramids and other types of temples that dotted all of Mexico. We've founded a number of them, but again, a lot of them were actually destroyed. Their main gods were uh, Texcatlipoca, who, if you look on the right there, is this god, the jaguar god, and Quetzalcoatl, who was the serpent god. And these guys actually would fight a lot. And these gods were like part man, part animal, but really were able to give them everything. Like Texcatlipoca was the guy who was the god of smoking mirror that created the world and was the giver and taker of life. Quetzalcoatl over here was the one that taught them everything. He taught them farming, he taught them other types of skills, and left and then came back, which we'll talk about because that's really important. But the top guy was Huitzilopochtli, who was the god of the sun. And this is really crucial because this came into their actual religion. The sacrifice was very important, and that the Aztecs practiced ritual bloodletting and human sacrifice. And the idea of the human sacrifice is that they would cut out the heart of the victim with this type of knife over here, an obsidian knife, because in the Americas, guess what? No metal, which we'll get to later on. And then sacrifice it to the sun. Now, why did we do this? Now, we don't want to just let them get off with killing people, but it was their religious belief that if the sun was not sacrificed to, that the sun would actually go out or die and then take the whole world with it. So if I'm that way, I might practice this too. What you actually end up seeing is that this society is incredibly strong, and they were growing, but it will actually be the Spanish that will kind of take them out. But this violent nature, this oppression, is what's going to help the Spanish later, because they will get allies to go against the Aztecs. But there's this incredibly strong and advanced civilization. The other big one in the Americas would be the Inca. The Inca were a huge civilization that actually went from pretty much almost more than half of the coast of South America. They were a gigantic empire. Okay, they went from the 1100s to around 1525. Their government was very strict. The king was believed to be descended from the gods, kind of almost like a pharaoh type figure. It seemed that he had religious implications in his rule as well. But again, here we have no writing, so we're really not sure what they were able to do because of that. And then the Spanish would come and wipe them out as well. But this is a huge empire. We know it was a multi ethnic empire. and they had a huge army, and again, a lot of achievements. One of the achievements they had was in agriculture, and these guys really took terraced farming to new levels. We've seen it before, but these guys, farmed in the Andes Mountains, and they were able, as you see here, this really kind of beautiful circle farm, and they're able to do things on the side of mountains to create land where there really wasn't any, and grow a multitude of crops, the most notable being the potato. The potato is a huge crop, is incredibly important, really, really durable, and was able to help this kind of kingdom grow that without the potato they might not have been able to have the food. Their cities were incredibly and well planned. This is a picture here of Machu Picchu, which of course is their most famous city up in the Andes Mountains. And what's really cool about these cities is they're actually earthquake proof. This area gets a lot of earthquake. Actually, Chile has the highest recorded earthquake of all time, which part of their empire was in. And the idea is that these pieces of stone were put together really without any mortar and designed that they could actually move a little bit. Modern day earthquake proof buildings, if you will, are actually designed to sway in an earthquake so they don't break. A rigid structure would break. Well, these buildings built 5, 6, 7, 800 years ago actually were built under that premise. Absolutely remarkable. What also was remarkable were their roads. Their roads are right up there kind of with the Persians and the Romans. They had a road that went through the Andes Mountains, which you see on the right side, that was actually 3,200 miles long. It was the size of America. And then they had a 2,000-mile long or 2,500-mile long coastal road. And then they had roads that connected the two, as you can see down here. It kept their society organized. It kept news going fast. The army could move. It was just incredible. So you have well-planned cities, you have clear use of mathematics with the building of those cities, you have these roads, you have high-end farming. This empire was just really, really incredible. And the Aztecs and the Incas, they were growing, and who knows how much they would have conquered, but an amazing thing happened, an amazing and not a good way, in 1519 and 1525 that would change the entire history of the world. Now, the other big thing is trade in these areas, and the Maya started this, and then the Aztecs would later pick it up. We're talking about trading things like jade and emerald and textiles. You have lots of luxury goods that go back and forth, things like animal skins and vanilla, cacao, because of course they have chocolate, which is wonderful, textiles, parrot feathers, lots of gold and silver. That's going to be a problem. But you see all of these interconnected areas. All of these areas are cities, this wonderful back and forth. The Inca would have massive trade within it, and that trade would also go up in North America. To give you an idea, and you don't have to know all of these, but you have this intense trade, especially west of the Mississippi, that you had things being traded from Canada actually down into northern Mexico. The Iroquois, who we'll talk about later, actually will form their own trade networks in the eastern portion of the United States, but out west in the plains, it was really impressive. Okay, and again, you don't have any animals here. There's no horses, there's no camels. So these people are actually walking, and it was really, really incredible that you see this trade that goes back and forth. You have these social networks, and the biggest of all the cities was in Cahokia, which is in modern-day Missouri. And this is a picture of Cahokia, what it would have looked like. This is actually what's left, this huge mound, very pyramidal, so perhaps some influence, because these guys aren't too far from the Aztecs. Maybe they were influenced by them. But you see how huge you have these villages, you have all of these houses, you have a wall for protection. Again, no writing here, but in the Americas it was just as dynamic. And again, this is a time period where in Europe it's in the Dark Ages, and even other areas that didn't have a lot going on, there was these dynamic empires and these wonderful civilizations that were growing up and doing really interesting things. All right, guys, we'll call it quits there, and I'll see you tomorrow.